be a press conference related to some advancements of Safe Rest Villages led by Commissioner.
Thank you, Margot, and hello, welcome everyone. Thank you for being here. In addition to the press, I want to welcome some partners and stakeholders who have made the time to be here today. Thank you. This is, of course, not Dan Ryan's plan. This is our collective efforts. Together we are strong. And last but not least, in the room, we have members of the Safe Rest Village team, and they're led by Charity Montez. Today, we're here to announce an emergency declaration that Mayor Wheeler has signed to help us keep moving forward on building of the Safe Rest Villages. Shortly, we'll announce 4 additional village locations and share a bit about each one. But first, I want to remind us why this is an emergency. We are facing a humanitarian crisis on our streets. We are facing a housing crisis. We are facing an unprecedented drug crisis. Together, they have knocked us on our knees. We all know it, we all see it, and we have heard your demands for action. We have for too long taken a housing first, housing only approach. Without a doubt, housing is a part of the solution to houselessness, but not everyone living on our street has an urgency to move into, the agencies rather, to move into an apartment on their own, particularly for those who have multiple diagnoses, those who need community and support to get beyond the challenges they face today. They need those on-ramp services so they can be successful in housing for the long term. My approach since I've taken office 16 months ago has been to support housing and services to get people to the point of being ready for housing. Again, an on-ramp to housing. That is what Safe Rest Villages will be, a first step off the streets towards restoration and stability. They are not the only thing that's needed, but they are an important part, and we cannot afford to wait. We can't keep talking about the perfection, the perfect solution, and have that get in the way of the good action. We need to innovate, to learn and improve as we build on-ramp systems that get results. Safe Rest Villages will be managed, restorative places with amenities, on-site peer support and case management with mental health and behavioral health services to help people get to whatever's next in their lives. We started this actually last April with the Shelter to Housing Continuum, which made outdoor shelters a new activity in the land use code. That made Safe Rest Villages possible. We had a unanimous city council support for that policy. Then last June, we passed the Streets Disability Ordinance, which defined the Safe Rest Village program and accepted Federal American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA, funds to be used for the villages. That too had unanimous support from the City Council and supportive testimony from our partners at Multnomah County. For those of you that don't know, the county operates our homeless services and the city runs infrastructure. City infrastructure, county services. Last September, we assembled the Safe Rest Village team, and most of them are here today. In the last 6 months, this small team has responded to thousands of emails and calls and reviewed hundreds of possible sites. We developed websites for communication and to share about the program. We've announced 3 and have embarked on real dialogue with the surrounding communities for those 3 sites. We've also announced shelter operator cultivate initiatives for the Menlo Park site, All Good Northwest for the Southwest Nato site, and they are also providing and helping us, they're the providers, helping us transform the emergency shelters which went up at the beginning of COVID, the ones on Water Avenue and Old Town, to managed restorative villages. If this was easy, perhaps it would have been done a long time ago. As such, we faced a few headwinds, both from the community and from internal bureaucracy. We're working through the concerns and questions with neighbors, and we're actually happy to see progress. Just recently, Multnomah Neighborhood Association voted in a 3-to-1 margin in favor of supporting the village and their community, with more than 70 voting to move forward with a good neighbor agreement. Today, we're here to address the internal headwinds with this declaration of emergency. Portlanders have been clear and we've heard them. Now is the time for action, and we are here to act. With today's declaration, we are announcing an additional 4 village locations, and I'd like to talk a little bit about each one and introduce some of those with partners that are here today. So I'd like to begin with my partner, Commissioner Jayapal, and I'll have you come up in just a minute. Just allow me to briefly talk about the two sites. Staff, were you going to put up any visuals on that on the slideshow? Okay. So we're happy to announce in North Portland that has experienced significant unsanctioned camping for some time along the Peninsula Crossing Trail. This is a site that is intended to be developed by the Housing Bureau of the future, and our use of the site will not interfere with that. In fact, some of our site preparation for the village will help the Housing Bureau's development when that time comes. That's known as Peninsula Crossing Trail. In Northeast, near the airport, we're happy to announce the site of our first safe park village on Northeast Sunderland Avenue near Dignity Village. This is PBOT property adjacent to the land owned by the Port of Portland. I'd like to have Commissioner Jayapal just speak to these two sites. It's great to have you here, Commissioner.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Commissioner Ryan. Good morning, everyone. I am Sushila Jayapal, Multnomah County Commissioner for District 2, which is northeastern parts of East Portland and includes the two sites that Commissioner Ryan just talked about. I want to begin by thanking Commissioner Ryan and his team for their partnership in developing a range of shelter and housing options for people experiencing houselessness. We know that the solution to houselessness is housing, and as Commissioner Ryan said, the support services need to stabilize people in their homes. So when we say housing first, we do not mean housing only. We mean housing and services. That's how the Joint Office of Homeless Services has housed more than 1,700 neighbors since July, literally moving them back into homes of their own. And we also know that we need a range of shorter-term shelter options as well to help address the immediate health and safety needs of people living unsheltered. That's why over the last several years, the city and county have expanded our continuum of care for people experiencing houselessness. We have dramatically expanded our shelter system from 650 or so beds in 2015 in fewer than a dozen shelters to more than 1,600 beds, motel rooms, and sleeping pods funded today across more than 30 shelters. We have added 300 beds since July alone, with more under development. Because of that work, we will emerge from COVID with hundreds more year-round services-enriched beds. And we've expanded the types of shelters we've developed, adding village models such as the St. John's Village, the Kenton Women's Village, and Beacon Village PDX, which just opened in Montebella. Outdoor managed camps, isolation motels, and motels designed specifically for people with behavioral health issues, as well as our new hybrid shelter in Arbor Lodge, also in District 2, with pods outside and beds inside. All of these shelters are part of a broader continuum of care that includes preventing houselessness in the first place, such as through our eviction prevention work, and moving people into housing by providing rent assistance and supportive services. And they are designed to be not just a place to sleep at night, but rather a stepping stone on that pathway to permanent housing. The Safe Rest villages that Commissioner Ryan is announcing today that will be sited at these locations will be part of that continuum of care. The two in my district on the Peninsula Crossing Trail and Sunderland are both in areas where we've seen a long-standing and growing presence of people living unsheltered in tents and vehicles. We've all seen them. Siting these villages where people already are will provide more humane conditions for them and that pathway to services and housing. I want to close by thanking neighbors in the surrounding areas. Although the growth of unsheltered camping has created health and safety issues for them as well, our housed neighbors have been supportive of creating managed sites in these locations. In fact, I first started advocating for a safe parking site near the Sunderland neighborhood after being approached by constituents who'd created a plan for such a site, but hadn't been able to secure a location for it. Addressing our crisis of houselessness is not one person's job. It's not one agency's job or one government's job. It is everyone's job. Everyone has a part to play. And I'm very grateful to the residents of District 2 for playing their part. Your support provides a model for the rest of the city and the county. I know you'll have lots of questions and there are a lot of details to be filled in, but I'm confident that working together, these sites will be an important addition to our system. Thank you for your partnership, and I look forward to working with you to bring these projects to fruition.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Jayapal. Next, I wanted to mention a new site in downtown. We're happy to announce a property on Northwest Nato Parkway. It's across the street from the River District Navigation Center. This is our only village that will be on private property, so we're especially grateful to Jim Winkler for leaning in to this important and historic new partnership. On the call today, I'd like to introduce Stan Penkin. Stan is the chair of the Pearl District Neighborhood Association and the chair of Home Share Oregon. Welcome, Stan.
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you, Safe Rest Village team. There is no single solution to our homeless problem, and government alone cannot solve it. Addressing this humanitarian crisis requires the will and effort of everyone working together. Government at all levels, our neighborhoods, the private sector, our social service agencies, those with lived experience, our faith communities, and many, many others. I appreciate the Safe Village initiative as one of the many efforts to help get our unhoused population into a safe environment with needed supportive services and ultimately transitioning into long-term affordable housing. When the River District Navigation Center adjacent to this property was proposed several years ago, the Pearl District neighborhood and its Old Town neighbor, along with numerous stakeholders, held a lengthy collaborative process to discuss and evaluate what that facility would look like, who it would serve, how it would operate, and how it would impact the neighborhood. This resulted in the development of a good neighbor agreement signed onto by a number of parties, and which has been pretty much successful. We look forward to having a similar collaboration with the Safe Rest Village team as we all work together towards positive solutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Stan Penkin. It's great to have you here. And finally, the fourth site. This will be in the Lentz neighborhood in Southeast, and we're happy to announce the Reedway site. This is on BES land, Environmental Services, the Bureau of Environmental Services land, slated for use in the future as a storage site for a large piece of equipment that Portland Parks and Recreation uses to grind up large material. It's near a natural area that has for years faced negative impacts from extended and expansive unsanctioned camping. Please remember, all of these sites are made possible through the ARPA funds from the federal government. We've chosen some sites today that are ground zero locations, areas that are experiencing a lot of humanitarian and environmental pain. We will restore both the souls and the soil as we build these on-ramps to services and housing. This is definitely about hope, and yes, this is about love. All referrals will go through the County Street Service Coordination Center, but will come in from a range of service providers, first responders, and social service organizations. Again, I'm really grateful that all of you are here today and have interest. And I think, Margot, we're ready to open it up to the room for questions. And I want to thank Commissioner Jayapal and Stan Penkin for being here to also field questions. I will also speak to the expertise of the details of specifically you, Charity Montez, as the head of the village team. Thanks.
Right. Well, thank you, Commissioner and Commissioner Jayapal and Stan Penkin. We really appreciate you being here today. So just a couple of quick reminders on how we're going to do this. Everyone stay muted. You're all doing a great job of that right now. Raise your hand and we will call on folks. I believe that the settings should allow you to unmute yourselves overall. But you know, we're always kind of rolling with a different Zoom situation, so we will see how that goes. And it sounds like Shane, you were the first one to raise your hand.
Hi there, Commissioner Ryan, can you hear me okay?
Yes, Shane, you're loud and clear.
Okay, great. Shane Dixon Kavanaugh here from the Oregonian. I just wanted to ask, today's announcement, in addition to the locations of these safe rest villages, is this emergency declaration that the mayor signed to help expedite this process. And given the months that it's taken to, given that this project is months behind schedule, I'm curious why only now an emergency declaration is being explored. And had there been discussions with the mayor's office prior to this about using this kind of emergency power to help move this thing along?
Thank you, Shane. I found out from the mayor late last week that this was brewing. I was very grateful to hear that. And it does give us the the agency that we need to actually move like we're in an emergency. And so I'll take what I can get. And again, this is an all-in solution. And I must say, having this agency to move forward with more opportunity and expedite the process is very refreshing. And I'm grateful that we're here today. That's where I'm at.
Thank you, Commissioner. And let's just go ahead and move on to Maggie Vespa from KGW. Maggie?
Hi, yeah, thank you so much for the time. We really appreciate it. Commissioner, we were talking in our newsroom. We've been covering this obviously for several months, and your own office imposed a deadline for yourselves to have these 6 sites selected and opened by the end of 2021. Obviously, we're months past that self-imposed deadline, and we're just now getting the 6 or more than half of the 6 sites selected, and we still don't have any opening dates. We were talking about the backdrop of the weather these last couple of days speaks to the need, like under the original plan, hundreds of people who are sleeping outside or living outside right now would be in these villages now during this winter weather. You mentioned bureaucratic red tape and you mentioned neighbor pushback, and those feel like really predictable hurdles, like things that would have been foreseen when you set that deadline for yourself. So I'm wondering if you can be more specific, maybe just about what hurdles your office encountered that you didn't anticipate when you set that deadline to have these open by the end of 2021. Like what is the holdup that you didn't see coming?
Thank you, Courtney. First, I'm a very ambitious person, and I wanted to get the bureaucracies to move faster. So in my first less than a year in office at the time, I thought it was a really good idea to set an ambitious goal, and then everything would move much faster. I learned a lot in that process. I can just give you a couple examples of some headwinds we didn't expect. The ARPA dollars are different than the CARES dollars. In fact, the red tape in terms of how you manage those funds from the federal government are quite cumbersome. And I want to thank Charity Montez for dealing with that. And then we had the predictable issues with supply chain, and then the predictable issues, as you were pointing to, about not in my bureau. And so it just there was so many internal challenges. So what I appreciate about the mayor imposing this is that we're removing many of those barriers internally, and I'm really grateful for that. So I'd rather I don't really spend a lot of time in the rearview mirror. It'd make me too depressed. I'd rather keep moving forward. So today we've removed a lot of the red tape, and I do see this being a process being much more fluid, and we're expediting the process going forward. So anyway, I appreciate your question. And yes, there are internal challenges with bureaucracies. I think everyone knows that. And I might be the elected official that has more empathy than anyone about how challenging it is sometimes to do business with the city and county. So I'm wearing my permit reform hat when I say that. So it's been a journey, and I've learned a lot.
Can I ask, I'm so sorry, just a quick follow-up. When you said not in my bureau, that feels like obviously a play on not in my backyard. Are there bureaus that are refusing to help with this?
I think that anytime you're I think what I really want to say by that is that, people have plans for their bureaus. And when you're in an emergency, that's a hiccup to those plans. So we are now able to lean in as one big organization and know that this is a priority. And we get to lean in the short term. There's some short-term sacrifices at this time if we're going to get our city out of a ditch. And the long term is hope. So it's natural. I think any large organization deals with such challenges. So I'm just grateful we're here today. And today we can announce the 4 sites, which gets us to 6 locations. And then, of course, you heard about transforming the emergency shelters into a restorative setting as well. So I'm really proud of the team for taking on so much work at such a short period of time.
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you, Maggie. Let's move on to Rebecca Ellis from OPB. Rebecca?
Very long, and I rest the team.
I might have missed this, but can you just give a number as to how many people you expect will be sheltered with what I believe are now 6 announced sites?
Rebecca, you're reading a little bit quiet, at least to me. You want to try that one again?
Is this any better?
A little bit.
Okay, I will go very close to my computer. Can you give a number as to how many people you expect to be sheltered in what I believe are now 6 announced sites?
Yes, thank you. I will do this. I will be careful, and Charity, I'm looking at you right now. So the maximum we have at each site is 60. However, these are assessments. This is a time to build your resilience. And so we're projecting that a villager will be on site for 6 to 9 months. And so just know there's that rotation. So Charity, let me just do this. None of the sites are going to be over 60. Let's say the average is 50. So that's like 300. But if you times that by 3, then you get closer to 1,000 in the ratio over a 3-year period. But please also know that we have the villages that we've restored, if you will, the emergency shelters, and we're already seeing great progress now that they're being managed by All Good. We've had 15 people just in the last month that have been able to move into permanent housing with services. So I like the fact that the system is growing. And as you heard earlier from Commissioner Jayapal, we have other shelter systems as well on the ground that perform this capacity as well.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I just want to introduce, for everyone who might not know her already, Charity Montez, the Houselessness Strategies Manager for the Safe Rest Villages Initiative and our city's work overall. Charity, you want to take this one a little bit more? I'm sorry, I know I promised you wouldn't have to do this.
Oh, it's great. Thank you. Commissioner, you covered it pretty well. So if we have 6 new sites and we're working through the plans for each site, the number of sleeping units we can have is based on the layout and the size of each location. But we do up to 60 sleeping units. We also know that each sleeping unit, these are low barrier shelters, so folks can have a partner in that unit with them. So each unit might have 2 people. And as the commissioner mentioned, this is not a forever home. This is a transition, shelter that's connecting folks onto the next step of their journey. So, each site, each shelter unit may serve a number of folks over the 3 years. And it remains to be seen, what those numbers are, but, approximately 30 shelter beds will be added to the system.
Thank you, Charity. Let's pivot over to Courtney Vaughn. Courtney?
Hi, yes, thank you. It's sort of a 2-part question here. One is, do you know who's building the shelters and what each might cost? And the other is, Commissioner Ryan, you mentioned a few weeks back during a neighborhood association meeting that there were sort of these hurdles like permits and everything to getting, and supplies to getting the sites up. Does the emergency declaration sort of clear those hurdles and make this easier to get off the ground? So first part of the question is, who's building them? What does each cost? And second is, what are any remaining hurdles to just getting each site set up? Thank you.
Let me speak. Thank you, Courtney. I'll start with answering part of the second question and then handing it over to Charity Montez. So yes, the emergency declaration will help us do just what's happening today, which is having the authority to focus on sites. Charity, I think that you're going to be more careful to answer this precisely with the detailed questions in the first part.
Yeah, I wanted to say that we are in the middle of a solicitation process. So I think what you meant when you said who's building the shelters, I think your question was about what are the tiny houses or the services structures that we'll be using and who's building, or who is providing those, what's the vendor that's providing those and how much will they cost? We are in the middle of a solicitation process, so I can't actually answer that question. We went out to bid and we are in the middle of that solicitation process now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Courtney. Kelly from K2, what do you got for us?
Hi there. Thank you for taking the time. I've got 2 questions for you. One of them about the new sites. Last time you guys announced the 4 sites, there was an issue with the flood assessment on one of them, so that changed things. Have these new sites that you're announcing today gone through all of those assessments that you require. It's been brought to our attention that people don't believe there's electricity at the Peninsula Crossing Trail, which I know you guys said was an important part. So can you talk a little bit about that? And then I have another question as well.
Yes, thank you, Kelly. Charity, I'm going to have you answer that question since you're in the weeds on this.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So the Peninsula Crossing Trail is located next to residential area. There is electricity nearby that we can bring onto the site. There are other utilities already on the site, including water. So that's part of the work that we'll be doing, is bringing electricity, sewer, and water further into the location. And your question about flood zone, special flood hazard area, we have reviewed these sites for that. Very specifically, the site on Reedway is adjacent to a special flood hazard area and conservation overlay, but we will not be in any of that site. It's a very large property and we will stay out of any of the conservation or flood areas.
And then my last question, Commissioner Ryan, is for you. Residents and neighbors that we've talked to in some of these areas that have heard that these sites are possible, are frustrated that they haven't been part of the conversation. They say that it seems like this is being done backwards, that you're announcing sites before ever talking to those who live directly in those neighborhoods. They don't say they're against it, but they say they want to be part of the conversation and they don't feel like they've been at this point. What would you say to them?
I will say that we are doing our best to act with urgency, and that now that it's on the table, we'll engage in a lot of dialogue. We hear from some of the same neighbors, especially at these sites, that they really wanted us to do something. We're focusing on some areas that have a lot of impact of houselessness, neighbors without any services. And so we did, in fact, pick sites that there's been a lot of contact with our office about us doing something. So I look forward to the engagement. I think what I've learned from it as well is that the more opportunity you have to do dialogue and actually listen to one another, that attitudes, beliefs, and values really move towards how can we be a part of this shared sacrifice for the long-term hope for this city. And I find that Portlanders really want to lean in right now and be collectively a part of that solution. I know that Commissioner Jayapal's had a lot of experience I've been in office for 15 months. My friend, Commissioner Jayapal's been in office a little bit longer and has developed a lot of relationships with people in her district. And I would like to invite you into this question if you'd like.
Thank you, Commissioner Ryan. Appreciate the question. You know, I think there's always a combination of views out there. I will say that for my part, I have been meeting with folks specifically around the Peninsula Crossing Trail for some months now. And one of the things that I really appreciated was that I heard a very thoughtful articulation of very specific issues that they were facing and solutions that they were offering. And in the process of that conversation, one of the solutions put on the table was the idea of having a managed camp in the neighborhood. So I'm sure there are other views on that. You know, I hear that. But I'm also saying that I appreciate neighbors who want to be part of the solution, and we are absolutely hearing those voices as well. And I think you'll see in the chat from Mary Helen Kincaid, I mentioned earlier that the Sunderland Plan was something that had been brought to me at least a year ago. Mary Helen was one of that group, along with other residents of Northeast Portland, who said, we think you can do a safe park here. We just need to find a space for it. And we are willing to have it in our neighborhood. So I appreciate those neighbors. And I think that's how we make progress going forward.
Mary Helen, nice to see you. Would you like to just offer a few words?
Sure. I'm just thrilled with this because it's been a long journey, and I actually gave up because I knew that Commissioner Jayapal would get it done through all the bureaucracy and then your interest. So I want to thank you for your efforts. All the negative comments by many of the media need to be thrown out because we need to celebrate the success. I said that in the chat. It doesn't matter the bad things that happen. A really good thing happened today, and I was Stan Pinkins on the call. We've worked on this as well as Pearl. Wonderful job. We need to be grateful. It's not a day to be negative. It's a day to celebrate that some of our neighbors are going to get housed. And it doesn't matter who didn't do something, who wouldn't do something, who wanted to do something and couldn't. we're here. And so thank you very much for your effort and all your staff that worked on this.
Thank you, Mary Helen. I really appreciate that. And so I'm just going to remind everyone that if you've already asked a question and still have your hand up, if it's just unnecessarily up, just going to remind you there. And then let's go to Julia Silverman.
Your work through this too.
Thank you very much. And thanks so much for taking the time to do this for us today.
Own your wins too.
My question is actually, so you've said this will house about 300 people, give or take, when everything is up and running, which is, of course, as everyone knows, a pretty small fraction of the percentage of people who need a place to live here in Portland and Multnomah County. I'm wondering if you can update us on the budget that was put aside this fall for motel purchases. Tell us where that's at, and whether any of the motels that were used for COVID isolation are being considered as, future housing for people who need it. Thank you.
Yes, this is a part of a comprehensive list of services. And I know at the county, the joint office is both the city and the county provide resources. The county runs it. And, Commissioner Jayapal, you might have some more knowledge about the hotel purchases, but I do know that we have more and more coming on board, and that's also part of the plan. So it is comprehensive. Thank you for acknowledging that it's more than, this is just one component of a much larger system. Would you like to add anything, Commissioner Jayapal?
Just a couple of things. I don't know the status of the additional purchases, and we can get back to you on that. In terms of the COVID motels, yes. So those were originally designed or intended to be just for the purposes of isolation or quarantine, but we are converting those into longer term permanent shelter and potentially at some point into housing as well. So but happy to get back to you on the first part of the question.
And I will add that, getting this work started, the Safe Rest Villages, taking the work into alternative shelters on the ground with services is something that was desperately needed. And I have been focused on that since day one in office. And much of that is my motivation to run for office was having a brother die on our streets that wasn't receiving services. And I'm well aware, we all are, that we have multiple challenges. There's people who are again, having multiple diagnoses, and we need to get to the bottom of that. We're in a state that's basically 50th in behavioral health and mental health, so we have to innovate. And so we're disrupting the system by building those on the ground. And that's a way that you can also start doing system change work, is by having the behavioral health and mental health services actually coming to the ground. So we're using this as a chance to innovate and to help the whole state and the community really move forward in terms of moving out of last place, and when it comes to those services, and also getting the city out of the ditch that it's currently in. In other words, you might say it's a drop in the bucket, but it's a pretty big drop.
Understood. Okay, let's go over to Nicole Hayden. Nicole.
Hello, thanks for hosting this. I have a couple really quick questions. One, I was wondering if you could tell us what the updated timeline is. When could we see the very first site open? Two, I'm not sure if I missed this, but is any of these sites slated to be a safe parking site? And then three, I know one or two of these sites had some contamination issues back a few years when they were initially looked at to be used as sanctioned camping sites. And I was wondering if that remediation has occurred or if there still needs to be some site remediation to make those safe places to sleep.
Thank you, Nicole. These sites will be open in 2022. The Sunderland site is a safe park site. And Charity, I know that you've come through all the issues when it came to the third question, which was around contamination concerns.
Yeah, thank you. I think you're specifically talking about the Reedway site. When it was a sanctioned camping site in 2017, there were some mystery piles of dirt that did have higher contamination levels. Those were appropriately removed and taken care of at the time. We are in regular conversation with the Bureau of Environmental Services, and it was formerly a light industrial use, and so anytime there's an industrial use, there's often there can be elevated levels of contaminants. We will work with BES on that site and do any kind of capping remediation necessary so that folks can sleep safely on the site. The same is true for the site along Northwest Nato. Similar to the River District Navigation Center, which it's adjacent to, there was some capping and remediation that had to happen, and we'll work with DEQ on that.
Nicole, let's remind ourselves that there's a lot of environmental devastation taking place currently in our natural areas. And so this is actually a step in the right direction to mitigate that. And so I'm thrilled that we're choosing spots that need environmental attention as well. So we've had a lot of community members have very grave concerns about that. And many of the new drugs on the streets are quite toxic and scary and really bad for the environment. So this is all part of a holistic opportunity to heal.
Thank you, Commissioner. And so we are running a little bit close up on time. I know we have some more questions. I'm just going to remind everyone to keep it a little bit short if possible, and we're probably cutting out follow-up questions at this point. So let's go ahead and do Taylor Griggs. Taylor.
Hi, I'm Taylor from Street Roots. So I do have two questions. One should be short. I guess I mean, all the other sites that have been announced previously were announced one at a time. I'm curious about kind of how the timeline on securing these 4 sites. It seems like it happened pretty quickly behind the scenes. And also I'm wondering, because of what you were saying about some of these sites being at quote ground zero locations, so I understand it's to benefit the people who are living there, maybe, but I understand there's the 150-foot camping ban around the perimeter. What are your plans for the people who are living there right now who either can't get into one of the villages because there's not enough room or don't want to for whatever reason?
Yeah, thank you, Taylor. First of all, the reason why we're able to announce 4 today is exactly the first question that Shane asked at the Oregonian was this gave us the agency with the emergency declaration. So these are sites that Charity Montez and her team have been looking at for some time. And we were moving through a slower process, if you will, to announce them. And so these just didn't happen overnight. We've been looking at them again for some time. So that's why. In terms of the need for a buffer zone around the villages, it's both for the neighbors that have asked for that, but really it's for the villagers. We really do see low bar entry, but leaving with resilience at a much higher level. In fact, we will be doing some really important data testing, looking at one's mental health, behavioral health assessment, one's workforce assessment and education, and then third, how they're doing as a member of the village. And that will be a way of monitoring when someone is ready to move on into successful housing, sometimes with services and sometimes independent. So that's all part of the journey. And we don't want them, why they're in that restorative setting, to be triggered when they instantly come out of the village. Anyone in recovery knows that when you're choosing recovery, you need to really have a lot of buffers and protections to keep to not relapse. So we're trying to do everything we can in a trauma-informed way. And yes, we will, and the navigation team at the county, they will be working with the providers to, of course, there's criteria on who would enter, but they will be focusing, of course, on the people that live in these areas and near these areas at this time. Thanks for the questions.
Thank you, Commissioner. Let's move on to Sarah Hurwitz from KBTV. Sarah.
Hey, yeah, so my question kind of piggybacks off that last one. I was really curious about the referral process, and it sounds like you covered it in short, but are you able to talk a little bit more about that and like how people would qualify to get in, if they're working with outreach organizations, that kind of thing. And also the piece that I think is really important to talk about too, is that not everybody wants to get off the streets. Some do, some don't. And I'm wondering if you can talk to that piece of, this is one aspect of helping the city, but there has to be probably other ways too of encouraging people to maybe live a different way.
Thank you. Charity or Jake, I think you would be best to answer that first question since you're already interfacing with the good people at the county and the providers.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jake Dornblaser, EM. I can talk a little bit. I'll talk about the option a little bit more, and that is something that people ask all the time, right? Option for people to move off the streets. And so one thing that I really want to talk about, and I have this from personal experience, is that if somebody's on the streets and they feel like their best option is the street, I think it's really important that we develop and continue developing different options for them to move into. And that's what these alternative villages are doing, is we're creating an alternative to the regular shelter model, hopefully meeting more people with what they need in their environment and getting them off the streets. So in the navigation teams that are currently meeting people out that are camping outside, they are giving these people their options. So they're continuing to meet with people, talk to them about different sheltering options throughout and different resources throughout the county and the city, and then referring them to villages or referring them to different shelter systems or different housing systems, depending on what they need. So the idea of encouraging people, like that's what the expanded navigation teams are doing a lot, is they're meeting with these people, they're talking to them, and they're trying to figure out what system that's already here or what's being developed will meet their needs. And then I think, what was the first part of the question? It was the referral system, right?
Yeah, so basically, would it be similar to kind of what you're saying there? It sounds like folks who go out and work with folks and ask them what they're looking for, kind of thing.
Yeah, and referring them to resources, right? So everybody needs different things, right? Some people have mental health issues, some people have physical health, and not everywhere can meet every single person's needs. So the idea is creating options where those people can be successful at. As far as who will be referring, we've been working with the county a lot on this, and so there's navigation teams, there's some service providers that can refer people. We're working with first responders to where they can refer people as well, and just trying to make sure that those people that are interacting with people that are camping or living on our streets in Portland are the people that are able to refer them to the appropriate places.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jake. And so we are running out of time a little bit more, and I want to give the commissioners an opportunity to close. So I think we can take one more very quick question. And if anyone else has additional questions, please feel free to follow up with me directly or with Brian Aptekar, who is the communications liaison for the Safe Rest Village program. So Sophie, I'm going to give you one last shot here so you can ask a quick question, and then we're going to start moving into wrapping this up at 1:25.
Sweet. Hey, this is Sophie. Thanks for having us this morning. Maybe I missed this, but does the emergency declaration clear the need for your guys' office to still obtain permits from, various city bureaus to develop the sites, or do those permits still have to be obtained through standard channels, or is it just like an expedited process? If you could elaborate on that just a little bit, that'd be great.
It definitely expedites the siting. And Charity, you want to take the rest of it? Because permits are still permits, yeah.
Permits are still permits. We're grateful that the Bureau of Development Services just recently published the Temporary Outdoor Shelters Code, program guide. So we will be following the guidance in that. But this emergency declaration gives, consolidates and coordinates the procurement and permitting processes for Commissioner Ryan so they can be expedited.
Thank you, Charity. And I think we could actually slip in just an additional question from Dan. Dan, do you want to just throw something out there?
Dan, you need to unmute.
I think he's unmuted.
Oh.
Can you hear me?
Dan, we can't really hear you. It's kind of like a Stranger Things type of a vibe.
What Dan wants to ask is basically.
Okay, I'm not totally sure what's going on there, but.
This is Elise Hawk, 26 News. I'm a coworker of Dan. I know he wants to talk more about the specifics of the red tape that's being eliminated, which may be what Sophie really just asked. But if there's anything else that you want to add, Charity, or Commissioner Ryan, about the red tape that's being eliminated. That's what Dan wants to know about.
Okay, I think that was a little bit, at least like half understood by me. So I think anything additional that we want to add about eliminating red tape, and then we could probably just take that and pivot into closing from Commissioner Ryan and Commissioner Jayapal. Sound good?
Yeah, sounds great. I'll start with you, Commissioner Jayapal. Thanks again for being here today.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you to your team, Commissioner Ryan. I want to echo really what Mary Helen said earlier, which is this is a good thing. We are adding options for people who need options. You know, there was a question earlier about people choosing to live on the streets. It's choosing among a limited set of options. And what these Safe Rest Villages do, in addition to the rest of our continuum of care, is expand that range of options. So thank you again, Commissioner Ryan, you and your team. And I come back to thank you, neighbors. We're looking forward to working with you on these.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just close by agreeing with my colleague and my friend, Commissioner Jayapal, that this is a very good day. We're doing the action that everyone in Portland is seeking. I think we've been choosing to tolerate the intolerable, and it's created a lot of distance between people who have lived in Portland for a while, and they just can't believe what they're seeing. And they want government to behave and expedite and partner like never before. And I think what you're witnessing today is a big step in that direction. And I'm very grateful to be a part of it. I've only been in office 15 months, and this is definitely one of the better days because you're seeing all of that action come together, and that's called getting results. So I look forward to answering more detailed questions, but more importantly, I look forward to supporting the village team as we get these built and we start providing services and we start to get people housed. And I will say this, because I say it often, I'll end with this. Some of our very best employees to work with those who are homeless and houseless are going to be the people that go through the villages, go into supportive housing, find a new life where they're sober and ready to give back what they were given. And so I'm really excited about the opportunity to improve and expand our workforce from those with lived experience. Thank you all for being here today. I appreciate your interest, and Portland's best days are definitely coming. Today we have hope. Thanks.
And thank you, everyone. I dropped my information and Brian and